She packed the blouse like it was nothing. The deep burgundy silk one. Tag still on. I'd seen her scroll past it on her phone months ago and mutter something like, "Too much for the office." Apparently, Denver gets a different dress code. "It's just a work trip with Michael," she said, slipping it into the carry-on like it hadn't just set the tone for the whole week. "You know, my work husband." She actually laughed when she said that, like it was a punchline we both agreed on. Tossed in a second pair of heels. Then a third. She was humming now. I stood in the doorway of our bedroom, hands in my pockets, watching her curate outfits I'd never seen her wear in 13 years of marriage. "You don't need to hover, David," she muttered without looking at me, like I was the house cat begging for food. "It's business. Don't be so insecure." Oh, there it was. The familiar phrase. Don't be so insecure. Every man reading this knows it. That line. Like we're supposed to thank them for the diagnosis. Smile. Nod. Swallow the acid rising in the back of our throat while they prance off to play house with the guy who calls them M in front of HR. So I nodded. That's all. Not because I agreed, but because I was already gone. She kissed the air near my cheek like she was clocking out of a shift she didn't care for anymore. Keys jingled. Suitcase rolled. Door shut. And I walked into my study. The binder was on the bottom shelf. Black leather, zippered, plain. You'd never look at it twice. Unless you were the guy who used to write corporate risk disclosures for a living. The guy who once created fail-safes for executives who thought NDAs were fireproof and prenups were optional reading. Page 41. That's where Clause 17 lived. I read it once, quietly. The language still held up. Specific. Cold. Binding. Then I picked up the landline. Yes, we still had one. And called the number printed at the top of my old firm's letterhead. "Activate 17, I said. Nothing more. And just like that, the fuse was lit. By noon, I'd emailed a trusted real estate agent. Not a big firm. Local. Discreet. She handled lake properties for retirees and divorcing millionaires. We spoke in shorthand. She knew what a Category Delta lease meant. Long-term tenant. No furniture, no trace. By 4 p.m., the movers were scheduled. I didn't take the piano, or the grandfather clock, or the painting she'd begged me to buy in Prague. I left those for her. Left that version of me in that house. Because he was no longer required. Look, most of you won't know my name. And that's fine. But if you're hearing this and it's ringing bells in the back of your mind, like maybe your wife just laughed a little too hard at a guy's joke on a strategy offsite, consider sticking around. This story isn't just mine anymore. And no joke, over 90% of you will listen without hitting that subscribe button. But if you do, it actually tells the team this kind of story matters. And maybe, just maybe, it gives the next David a reason to prepare a little earlier. Anyway, back to Emily. While she was probably ordering a cocktail in the airport lounge, telling Michael how David's sweet but boring, I was backing up data from our joint cloud drive. Not snooping, just organizing. She'd never noticed the missing folder titled Shared Travel. But our accountant would. I didn't rage. I didn't spiral. I didn't drink. What I did was far worse. I planned. And that night, as the sun dropped behind the trees outside the lake house, I sat with a mug of chamomile tea, lit the fireplace, and looked out over the water. That's when I realized something strange. I wasn't angry anymore. I was already somewhere else entirely. A place she didn't even know existed. And by the time she found it, she'd have no way in. Emily texted me from the airport. Delayed 20 minutes. Already chaos here, lol. Hope you got something good for dinner, Red Heart. I didn't reply. What was there to say? She was probably sitting in the lounge, sipping something expensive on the company's dime, laughing at some joke Michael made about the joys of marriage. That's his brand. Light, flirty, just barely inappropriate. Enough deniability to survive HR. Enough charm to keep a bored executive wife entertained across state lines. I wasn't tracking her flight. I knew where she'd land, which hotel she'd walk into, which man's hand would brush the small of her back as she laughed too loudly over a shared Uber receipt. She thought I was playing checkers. She had no idea I built the damn board. Instead, I dialed Gail, my real estate agent. We hadn't spoken in months, but she picked up on the second ring. "Mr. Crawford," she said, voice calm. "Are we proceeding with the lake house?" "We are." "Timeline?" "Immediate. Lease term, 1 year. Discretion required. You know the rest." "I do. You'll have a lease draft by noon. Movers? Already booked. I've just got to clear the attic." We hung up. No questions. That's why I chose her. Then I opened my email client and typed just 4 words to a secure contact at my old firm. Activation request. Clause 17. The beauty of Clause 17 was its simplicity. It wasn't loud. It didn't accuse. It didn't threaten. It just moved. Like an iceberg. Massive, slow, inevitable. Legal friction was built into it, like a hydraulic press wrapped in velvet. Designed to trigger a quiet review whenever patterns of ethical deviation were observed by a third party, meaning me. And only me. It wasn't just about the prenup. That would have been too predictable. No. Clause 17 connected to something deeper. Emily's company had hired my former firm 2 years ago for external integrity audits. I helped write the framework before I retired. She didn't know that. Why would she? She never cared what I did at work. Just that I remembered her green smoothie order. I poured myself a drink, scotch, neat, and walked to the garage. Opened a dusty cabinet. Pulled out a cardboard banker's box labeled private. Hold until request. Inside were 5 folders. 1 for our mortgage. 1 for our LLCs. 1 for old statements. And 2 labeled with her name. Not accusations. Just documentation. Airline confirmations from past conferences. A receipt for a spa treatment for 2. Billed to the company card. A photo someone once texted me during a conference in Phoenix, where her hand rested a little too familiarly on her work husband's lap during a panel on diversity hiring. I didn't show her those. I didn't mention them. Because none of it was for an argument. It was for leverage. By sunset, the lake house was officially off the market. I'd signed the lease myself, electronically, as sole owner. It wasn't just a retreat, it was my firewall. I scheduled the bank transfer to buy out her share of the condo. Using an LLC she forgot we'd created back when we thought we'd be flipping properties. For tax purposes, she'd said. I let her keep the term. Everything was clean, quiet, legal. At 6:14 p.m., I received confirmation from the internal compliance contact at her company. Acknowledged. Clause 17 framework reviewed. We'll proceed discreetly. She would never know who flagged it. The audit trail wouldn't show my name. That was part of the design. That night, I slept at the lake house for the first time in years. The place smelled like cedar and distance. I sat on the deck with a blanket and let the stillness swallow me. No sirens. No hum of the dishwasher. No passive-aggressive sigh from the next room. Just silence. She thought this was about revenge. It wasn't. It was subtraction. Remove the noise. Remove the lies. Remove the woman who packed her silk blouse like she was owed something for tolerating me. She once told her sister, after one of our Thanksgivings, David's the kind of guy who never leaves. He just waits you out. She wasn't wrong. Except this time, I left first. And I wasn't waiting. I was closing. Denver, day 2. Emily hadn't texted since she landed. Not even one of her made it safe messages, the kind she sends with a heart emoji to pretend she still operates on autopilot affection. I didn't expect one. That script had already ended. By then, the lake house had running water, fresh linens, and a new mailbox key. I was midway through cleaning out a storage closet when I heard the buzz from the old phone I kept powered for exactly this kind of moment. No SIM card. No apps. Just encrypted email and an address list limited to 7 names. The subject line hit me like a quiet thunderclap. Look who just walked in. The sender? Cal Morris. Retired cybersecurity contractor. Ran the audits for Emily's firm before their internal reorg. We played golf once at a company retreat back in 19. He drank Diet Coke the entire time and beat everyone by 20 strokes. He also never forgot faces. Or mistakes. He'd stayed subscribed to the firm's alumni updates and social snapshots. Basically a running slideshow of executive offsites, team building, and other HR-friendly euphemisms for corporate leisure. The photo wasn't scandalous at first glance. Just Emily. In a hot tub. Arm casually draped across Michael's shoulders. A half-finished mimosa in her free hand. Her head tilted back, laughing at something just out of frame. No name tags. No captions. But unmistakably her. Hair tied back the way she never wore it at home. The same blouse, now unbuttoned and tied at the waist, floating open just enough to answer a question no ethics officer ever wants to ask. Cal's note beneath the image was as dry as ever. Didn't know your wife was into wellness retreats. Thought they cut budgets this year. I stared at the image. Not with heartbreak. Not even with anger. Just confirmation. Not that she was cheating. I knew that already. But that she was visible. Public. That she no longer cared who saw. I forwarded the photo to one address only. Then deleted the message. And the image. Not just from the inbox. I accessed the phone's secure drive and hard-wiped the storage block. Not because I was worried about privacy, but because it was never about keeping evidence. It was about activating outcomes. I didn't need the photo for court. I wouldn't be going to court. I needed the photo because it triggered subclause 17b. Visual confirmation of conduct deemed reputationally damaging to shared or fiduciary partners shall be treated as ethical breach regardless of physical infidelity. My language. Her signature. Buried in a folder called Executive Exceptions she'd never read. The forwarded image didn't go to a lawyer. It went to an old friend in compliance oversight. Not internal legal. Ethics. A department far less interested in, she said, and far more interested in what's on record, what's on payroll, and who's getting fired before the board meets next quarter. 2 hours later, I received a silent notification. File received. Timestamp logged. Audit stream initiated. That's it. No drama. No reply. Just the whir of the engine starting. I closed the laptop and took out the trash. Literally. Old receipts. Leftover photos from a camping trip we never actually took. A box labeled anniversary cards, mostly store-bought, signed with 3-second messages like, "Love you, always." Into the bin. Out of my system. Meanwhile, somewhere in Colorado, Emily was floating in warmth, eyes closed, surrounded by bubbles and lies, and another man's voice telling her she was still interesting. She had no idea the photo existed, even less idea what it meant, and absolutely no clue that in 24 hours, her badge wouldn't scan. Her inbox would vanish, and her boss, Michael, would suddenly start whispering words like exposure and malfeasance into a phone he wouldn't know was being monitored. Because Emily never thought the quiet man in her bed was capable of anything but silence. She mistook calm for weakness. And now, she was laughing in a hot tub, while the very foundation beneath her began to rot. Quietly, elegantly, legally, she packed heels for Denver. She should have packed an attorney. The door didn't open the way it used to. That was the first thing she noticed. The resistance. The faint shift in air pressure as if the house exhaled when she entered. Emily rolled her suitcase over the threshold and paused. No scent of candles. No low hum of the dishwasher on its usual Sunday night cycle. Just silence. "David?" she called out, voice already thinner than she intended. No answer. The foyer was dim. Her heels clicked against the tile louder than usual. She turned on the light and blinked. The mirror was gone. The side table too. Even the rug had been rolled up and replaced with plain hardwood. She pulled her suitcase forward into the living room and froze. No couch. No coffee table. No framed wedding photo on the mantel. The one from Maine, where she was barefoot and he had that rare smile. Almost smirking, because she'd whispered something about eloping. The frame was gone. So was the mantel. Literally. The fireplace had been sealed with drywall. Seamless. She wheeled herself toward the bedroom, panic rising, breath short. The bedroom door was open. Lights already on. The bed frame stood alone, stripped of sheets, comforter, pillows, even the mattress protector. One nightstand left, the one she never used. She stepped to the closet and yanked it open. A single hanger swayed gently on the rod, as if mocking her. Taped to the inside of the door was a single square of paper. Folded once. She opened it. For words, typed. Nothing here was accidental. No signature. She stumbled back like someone had slapped her. Her phone was already in her hand before she realized it. Dialing. Voicemail. "David, what the hell is going on?" she barked. "Call me back right now." "What is this? Did we get robbed? Are you messing with me?" She ended the call, immediately hit redial. Nothing. She scrolled down, found a different name. Michael. Her boss. He picked up on the second ring. Background noise, some kind of TV, maybe. Emily. His voice wasn't stern. It wasn't angry. It was frightened. She blinked. "Michael." He paused. "Emily, did you do something stupid?" "What? What are you talking about?" "David's gone. He cleaned out the whole house. He left a note. He's not answering." "Did he call you?" Michael sounded like he was pacing. "Did you submit any reimbursements from the trip?" he asked, low. "Did you use your corporate card for anything sensitive?" She frowned. "What? No. I mean just the hotel. Dinner. Room service." "What?" He exhaled hard. "Emily, he didn't just divorce you." "What the hell does that mean?" A long pause. He triggered something. I think he initiated a formal integrity review. And it's not coming from our department. It's external." She sat down, slowly, on the bare bed frame. Her suitcase still by the door. It looked absurd now, like a visitor's. Her mouth went dry. "But he retired. He doesn't even work in." "He didn't retire." "Not really," Michael whispered. "And if what I'm hearing is correct, he drafted some of the ethics language we're still bound by." That stopped her. "You're saying he?" "I'm saying someone from his old firm requested records this morning. Travel logs. Corporate card statements. They sent over clause citations. Not just policy breaches, structural. Structural, she whispered. Clause 17, he said. She stared at the note in her hand. What the hell is Clause 17? I don't know, but legal's already red flagged it. And the board is meeting first thing tomorrow. Click. He hung up. She sat there for a full minute before she noticed her hand was trembling. Her body was reacting faster than her mind could catch up. A cold wave washed through her chest and down her spine. Clause 17. She'd heard that somewhere before. The prenup. Her hands scrambled through her purse. Wallet. Lip balm. Receipts. Nothing. The prenup was at her mom's place. In a drawer. She hadn't looked at it in years. Clause 17. She stood, knees locked, and looked around the room again. The absence was the message. David hadn't yelled. He hadn't begged. He hadn't even confronted. He'd just removed himself, surgically, and left a single echo behind. Nothing here was accidental. The beep didn't come. Emily pressed her badge again, slower this time, like maybe it had just missed the sensor. Nothing. She flipped it over, tried the back side. Still nothing. The tiny red light blinked at her like a heartbeat, pulsing rejection. Badge error, the screen read. She looked around. No one else was having trouble. A junior analyst walked past her and scanned in with a cheerful beep, earbuds in, oblivious. A courier wheeled in a cart of boxed lunches. The front desk security guard glanced up, then quickly away. Emily stepped back, adjusted her coat, tried again. Still red. Seriously? She muttered, yanking off her lanyard. That's when one of the security staff emerged from behind the desk. Middle-aged, stiff posture, hands held in front like he'd practiced this exact conversation. He avoided eye contact. Ms. Travers, he said, nodding slightly. I've been told to inform you. You've been temporarily restricted from entry, pending internal review. She laughed, short, sharp, involuntary. I work here. I'm VP of External Affairs. I understand, he replied, tone flat. We were told not to allow access. Told by who? I'm not authorized to say. I'm sorry. You think this is funny? She snapped. You think I can't walk past you if I really wanted to? A second guard appeared. No one's trying to escalate. The first one said quietly. We're just following instructions. Emily stepped back, shaking her head. This had to be a mistake. She opened her phone. Her Outlook wouldn't load. Gmail, nothing. Slack, disconnected. She tried to log in through the employee portal, and it bounced her out. Account not recognized. The nausea hit her in a wave. She stared through the glass at the elevators beyond the lobby. People she knew walked past. No one looked her way. Inside, she could see the large conference room lights on. The blinds partially open. Suits. Laptops. A stack of red folders being handed around. Not a casual Monday meeting. Emergency ethics. But Michael wasn't there. Her boss hadn't responded to her texts since last night. She called again. Voicemail. Called legal. No answer. She called her assistant's personal number. No answer. The world wasn't spinning out of control. It was being carefully rotated, just fast enough to knock her off balance without tipping the building. Finally, she called HR. A new voice answered. Not the usual receptionist. HR, this is Clara. This is Emily Travers. I've been locked out. I need someone to. There was a pause. Miss Travers, I'm going to need to refer you to external counsel. We've been advised not to communicate directly at this time. What? What? I'm sorry. I can't provide any additional information. The call dropped. She didn't know if Clara hung up or if her phone glitched from sheer stress. Emily staggered to a bench just outside the building and sat, stiff, trying not to hyperventilate. She pulled up the only app that hadn't been locked, Notes, and started typing keywords, anything she could remember. Clause 17. It floated back again, like a ghost. She had signed something with that phrase. But where? It wasn't just a prenup clause. It was something in her onboarding packet, or the conflict of interest disclosure. She couldn't remember. It all blended together. So many meetings, so many just sign here, documents she'd never fully read. Legal jargon. Boilerplate. Except David didn't write boilerplate. He wrote weapons. And now the pieces clicked. Clause 17 was his. The ethics committee wasn't here by chance. They were here because someone activated a trigger, precise, surgical. A clause buried deep enough that legal had to check if it was still valid. It was. And David's former firm? They weren't just contracted. They were embedded. Quietly hired 6 months ago for a compliance audit she hadn't even paid attention to. She'd actually laughed about it with Michael in the elevator. Guess the old watchdogs are sniffing around again, she'd said. Michael had smirked. As long as they stay in their kennel. They hadn't. And now, Neither of them had keys to the building. Emily stood up, cold in her bones, and looked up at the steel and glass tower that had once made her feel powerful. Now it looked like a mausoleum. Because this wasn't a collapse. It was a controlled demolition. And every charge was planted by the man who used to pack her lunch while she scrolled Instagram. He hadn't raised his voice. He didn't have to. He'd just written a clause. And waited. She stared at the HR notice like it was written in another language. But the meaning was crystal clear. Effective immediately, an internal review into unreported personal relationships impacting financial oversight is underway. All affected parties will be contacted individually. There was no name, no position, no accusation, but it landed like a knife. The subject line had hit her personal email at 9:03 a.m., just 3 hours after she stood in front of her own office building like an intern who forgot her badge. It came from an internal address she didn't recognize, Compliance Ops at. The kind of burner mailbox companies use when they want legal separation between the cinder and the fallout. Her first instinct was rage. She wasn't some junior associate caught sleeping with her team lead. She was an executive. She built the external affairs department from the ground up. She managed crises, spun stories. She knew where the bodies were buried because half the time she helped bury them. And now she was being ghosted. She called Michael again. No answer. Texted, "I need to talk. This is escalating." Nothing. She paced her mother's guest room, phone pressed to her ear as she dialed legal. "Hi. This is Emily Travers," she said when the receptionist picked up. "I need to speak to someone in council about this review. I was just locked out of my accounts." "I'm sorry, Ms. Travers," the voice said quickly, with the tone of someone reciting from a script. "We've been advised not to engage in direct communication with you at this time. Conflict of interest protocols are in place." Emily blinked. "I work there. You know me. You've seen me every Christmas for 8 years. I understand. This decision was made by executive compliance and legal jointly. Who the hell approved that? I'm not authorized to discuss further." Click. She stood in place, listening to the silence that followed like it might give her an answer. Her jaw tightened. She tried to log into the remote company portal from her iPad, just to access her calendar, her contacts. Access denied. The message flashed in neutral font. "Your credentials have been disabled. Please contact system administrator." She hurled the tablet onto the bed. What the hell was happening? No one had confronted her. No HR email asking to clarify recent travel activity. No preliminary meeting. No flag on her expense reports. Nothing. Just erasure. They weren't handling this like a mistake. They were handling it like containment. It took her less than 5 minutes to spiral from disbelief to accusation. She called a peer in finance, someone she'd gone to college with. No answer. Left a message. Then another. Another. Silence. She opened her LinkedIn, checked her messages. Already a new post from the company page. "We take integrity seriously. Our commitment to unbiased oversight ensures accountability at every level." The comments were already flooding in. "Proud to work here. Transparency matters." She wanted to vomit. Then, under the post, she saw it. A comment from someone named G.R. Fanning. "Took you long enough. Should have reviewed executive travel last year." Her stomach turned. That name wasn't familiar. But the timing, it lined up exactly with David's last audit. The one he said was minor, back before his retirement party. She hadn't even attended. She was traveling. David's name wasn't on anything. Not the email. Not the system logs. Not the memo. But his fingerprints were everywhere. Because he didn't need credit. He needed distance. She had once told him he didn't understand how real business worked. But this was the most business thing she'd ever seen. They weren't firing her. They were making her irrelevant. Slowly. Strategically. Without saying a word. Because if they said it, she could deny it. But if no one speaks, she's just gone. A liability, pending review. A headline they're trying to avoid. Emily stared at the wall, suddenly aware of how quiet her phone was. No alerts. No calls. No meeting invites. And for the first time in her career, she realized. She wasn't just on the outside. She didn't even have a door to knock on anymore. Somewhere, David was probably drinking tea. Reading. Smiling maybe. Because he knew this kind of ending. Not explosive. Not chaotic. Just silent. And total. The drive to her mother's house felt longer than usual. Emily gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white, her brain flickering between disbelief and fury. Her inbox was dead. Her calendar, wiped. Michael had gone dark. And David? He might as well have vanished into the earth. Her mother greeted her with a confused frown and a kiss on the cheek. "You're pale. What's going on? Is David okay?" Emily muttered something about needing to grab a few things. Didn't answer questions. Didn't sit down. She went straight for the hallway closet, the one with the boxes no one had touched since the last tax year. Fourth shelf. Back corner. 2 black banker boxes labeled in fading Sharpie, wedding and legal. She yanked both down, scattering old envelopes, curled up photo negatives, a dried corsage that puffed dust when it hit the floor. None of it mattered. She ripped open legal, flinging aside medical forms, insurance policies, their old joint will. Then her fingers found the thick manila envelope. Prenup. She hadn't looked at it in over a decade. At the time, it was just one more checkbox before the ceremony. David had asked for it without emotion. Calmly, almost apologetically. I've worked too long to have it all vanish in a fight, he'd said. It's not personal. She had laughed and waved it off. Fine. You don't have to explain. I trust you. She'd skimmed maybe the first page. 2 glasses of wine in, during a weekend where she was too distracted by napkin colors and honeymoon deposits to care about clauses. She dropped to the hallway floor, cross-legged like a child, and flipped through the pages now with trembling hands. Clause 17 was on page 6. She didn't breathe while reading it. In the event of documented infidelity, Party B forfeits all access to marital property, including secondary residences, vehicles, and any jointly held equity unless otherwise amended in writing and notarized prior to the event in question. Party B, Emily Travers. It wasn't vague. It wasn't symbolic. It was clinical, brutal, and airtight. Forfeits all access, unless otherwise amended. She flipped to the signature page. There it was. Her name, in her own handwriting. Loopy, confident, slightly tilted to the right. A little hard over the I. The pen had bled slightly through the paper. Dated. Witnessed. Notarized. Her mother peeked into the hallway, holding a cup of tea. Emmy? What's going on? Emily didn't answer. She just sat there, holding the contract that had just detonated everything. Her mother stepped closer. Is that the prenup? Emily nodded slowly. Her mother sat beside her, watching her closely. You remember when you signed it? She asked. Emily hesitated. I thought it was cute, she said finally. That he wanted to protect himself. I thought it was sweet that he was careful. He said it was standard. I didn't even read half of it. Her mother didn't speak. Then, he's a compliance officer, Emily. Nothing he does is standard. Clause 17 hadn't come out of the blue. It wasn't a reaction. It was architecture. A quiet structure built long ago, reinforced by every overlooked moment, every brushed-off weekend he spent in his study, updating documents. She had mocked that. David and his little binders. She'd once joked to a friend over wine. That man could organize a funeral in advance and send you an invoice for the emotion. The joke wasn't funny anymore. Now, it was prophecy. She flipped back through the prenup. Every word felt like a countdown she hadn't known was ticking. The vehicles, his name. The condo, technically joint, but under the umbrella of an LLC David had set up and funded. She had signed that paperwork too, blindly. She pulled out her phone and tried to access the online mortgage account. Access denied. Not her name on file. Even the car, the Lexus SUV she'd driven to the airport, was registered through a company fleet. Not her personal ownership. It all clicked. She'd been living in the illusion of equality. He'd been building a firewall. Not to hurt her. To protect himself. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was final. Emily pressed her palms into her eyes until she saw stars, then folded the prenup shut. There was nothing left to contest. David hadn't taken everything. She'd handed it to him, with a heart over the I. Her phone rang at 7:46 p.m. She almost dropped it. For over 48 hours, it had been a dead brick. No calls, no messages, no calendar pings. Just a screen full of increasingly desperate attempts to get back into systems that no longer recognized her. Contacts she'd once had on speed dial were now gate-kept by out-of-office, replies, or silence. But this number, she still knew by heart. Michael. She answered before the second ring. Michael. Finally. What the hell is going on? I'm being treated like a criminal, and no one will tell me. His voice cut through her spiral. Quiet. Strained. Emily. Please tell me you didn't expense anything. The words stopped her cold. I what? No. I mean, just the hotel, and... He interrupted. The photos, he said, barely above a whisper. The room receipt. The timestamp matches the location metadata. The minibar charges. Do you realize how bad this looks? She stood slowly from the couch, the prenup still open on the coffee table in front of her like a corpse she hadn't had the nerve to bury. Her mother, in the next room, muted the TV. Michael, she began, trying to steady her voice. It was a business trip. You approved it. We shared a room once. That wasn't illegal. You didn't tell anyone, he said sharply. You didn't disclose the relationship. That's a breach of ethics and financial oversight. It wasn't a relationship, she snapped. Then why is legal calling it fraud? He fired back. Silence. Emily's throat closed. She tried to form a reply, but her brain was already rushing backward, retracing every dinner, every drink, every cab she and Michael shared under the label of collaboration. You don't understand, she finally choked out. David, he's doing this. He set this up. He's behind. No, you don't understand, Michael said. Now he sounded breathless. Not angry, terrified. Legal isn't talking about David. They're talking about you. You're the one whose badge is locked. You're the one they're scrubbing access for. You're the one in every flagged expense report. But we all bend the rules, she whispered. We've all expensed stuff. There's bending, he hissed. And then there's pattern misuse with undisclosed conflict. Do you even know what that means in this industry? Her knees buckled, and she dropped back onto the couch. They're bringing in external auditors, he continued. Not just for you. For me. For our entire department. The board is furious. I just spent an hour with outside counsel trying to explain why there were 4 consecutive charges for room service under your name, 2 days after a training seminar that never officially existed on our calendar. I didn't think anyone would, she started. That's the problem, he snapped. You didn't think. You assumed nobody was watching. I didn't know David still had reach. This isn't about your husband. Michael exploded. This is about us. About you submitting paperwork that violated multiple layers of compliance. And now they're going back through everything. Every quarterly statement. Every bonus. Every employee referral you signed off on. Everything. Silence hung again. Then softer. Emily, what else did you do? Her lips moved, but nothing came out. Because the truth was, she didn't know. Not anymore. The innocent trips, the client dinners that were just the two of them, the gifts she marked down as vendor appreciation, the add-on days in resorts that happened to fall on long weekends. Every detail blurred together now. What was personal, what was business, what was convenient. She had played the game the way everyone played it. But she forgot the one rule that mattered. Don't leave a paper trail if your husband invented the damn paper. I'll call you back, she muttered, and hung up before he could respond. Then she stared at the room receipt from Denver, still crumpled in her handbag. Pulled it out. 1 room. King bed. 2 guests listed. Charged to the corporate card. Signed, her name. She hadn't even glanced at it when it printed. Too busy ordering dessert. Now, it looked like Exhibit A in a federal case. The call didn't just shake her. It broke something fundamental. Because for the first time, Emily realized this wasn't about a failed marriage. It was about corporate fraud. And she might not just lose her job. She might lose everything. The doorbell rang just after noon. Her mother called out from the kitchen. You expecting something, Emmy? Emily didn't respond. She was on the couch, still in yesterday's clothes, staring at her phone like it might blink back to life and tell her it was all just a glitch. That her badge worked again. That her name hadn't already started dissolving from the company org chart. She heard the screen door creak open, the thud of a package landing inside, and the familiar tap-tap of her mother's slippers approaching. It's for you, her mom said, holding out a thick cardboard envelope. No return address. Just her name, printed in clean block letters. Emily sat up slowly, her hands already numb. Inside was a single white envelope. High-grade stationery. Embossed seal. The kind companies use when they want you to know it's formal before you even open it. She peeled it back, and her breath caught. To the board of directors. It was dated nearly 4 months ago. The letterhead was plain, but the name beneath it wasn't David. It was D.W. Crawford, external oversight consultant. She blinked hard, rereading it. Her hands started to shake before she even reached the second paragraph. This is not a complaint. It is a request for clarification. I have observed a pattern of travel-related expense activity that may fall outside the scope of your internal ethics protocols. Specifically, overlapping dates between company-funded travel and non-official event records. I've enclosed 6 anonymized examples for review, including supporting documentation. The enclosures were clipped behind the letter. She flipped through them. Exhibit 3. Denver. 6 months ago. A boutique hotel. Room service ordered at 1:12 a.m. 2 entrees. Champagne. Room listed under Michael Fenton. Payment method. Corporate card ending in 2398. Guest attached to the receipt. Emily Travers. Her heart felt like it was beating in her throat. It wasn't just the Denver trip. Exhibit 1 was from San Diego. Exhibit 5, Toronto. Each one paired with dates, receipts, and in one case, a photo of her badge scanned into the executive lounge at a hotel she didn't remember ever reporting. No accusations, just data, laid out like puzzle pieces, quietly assembled by a man no one in the building even remembered as a threat. She flipped back to the cover letter, eyes scanning the closing line. I understand this may require discretion. My role here is not to disrupt, but to inform. In the absence of internal escalation, I reserve the right to elevate these findings to external auditors under Section 7 of the Ethics Mandate, should the patterns remain unaddressed. Signed, D.W. Crawford, External Oversight Consultant, Regulatory and Ethics Liaison, Tier 3 Review. Emily let out a raw, involuntary noise. Half laugh, half scream. Her mother rushed in, alarmed. What is it? What happened? She couldn't even form words. She stood, clutching the papers, backing away like they might bite. Her mother looked over her shoulder. That's David's signature, she said softly. No, Emily said. No, it's not. It's someone else. He used a title. I didn't even know he was still. Then the realization hit, like a gut punch. He never stopped working. Not really. The retirement party. The months he spent getting the house in order. The long walks. The solo drives to the cabin. The nights he stayed up late, organizing old files. It had all been preparation. David had embedded himself into the system months ago, not to blow it up, to bleed it slowly, clinically, in a language no one at her company could deny because he helped write it. He didn't call her out. He didn't rage or threaten or send her texts demanding answers. He sent a letter, not to her, to the board. He made himself undeniable, a presence inside the very structure she used to feel safe in. A virus, installed by hand, using tools she never bothered to understand. She collapsed back onto the couch, the documents spilling across the floor. Her mother hovered nearby, speechless. Why didn't he just divorce me? Emily asked, her voice small. Why not just yell? Fight. Take me to court. Her mother said nothing. Because the answer was clear. David hadn't wanted to end the marriage. He wanted to erase it from the foundation of her life. From her job, her finances, her name. Not with rage, with record-keeping. He had buried her not in scandal, but in systems. And the scariest part? She never saw it coming. Because she never thought a man like him could be dangerous. Until now. Friday morning, the ping came from her banking app. She almost didn't check it, assumed it was another fraud alert or auto-login failure. But there it was, glowing cold and clean. Escrow transfer complete. Property reassigned. Joint mortgage amended. She blinked. The condo. Their home. She hadn't signed anything. Hadn't agreed to a sale. But as she read the attached note, the reality set in with clinical precision. Effective October 18th, escrow funds transferred from Crawford Holdings LLC to satisfy final terms outlined in Petition Clause 9b. Co-owner removed. Title remains solely in Travers's name. Mortgage responsibility updated accordingly. Emily's name remained on the loan. David's was gone. He'd bought her out, using a corporate shell she'd forgotten existed. Technically, it was an investment entity they created 8 years ago when they flirted with the idea of flipping houses. She let him handle the paperwork, called it his little hobby. Never noticed when he restructured the ownership after year 1. Now, he used it like a scalpel. The funds came from their shared equity, but diverted through an LLC that shielded him, legally and financially. She would be responsible for the remaining debt, upkeep, taxes, and since she was still technically residing at her mother's, the legal exposure was all hers. He didn't fight her for the house. He left it standing and walked away with the ground beneath it. An hour later, her phone buzzed again. Email. No subject. No body. Just an attachment. She opened it. A photo. Grainy. Scanned from paper. It was a single clause, highlighted. In the event of documented infidelity, Party B forfeits all access to marital property, including secondary residences, vehicles, and any jointly held equity unless otherwise amended. She recognized the signature at the bottom. Hers. That little heart above the I. Beneath the photo, one single line of text. You said I was insecure. Turns out, I was prepared. That was it. No threats. No demands. No attempts at reconciliation or gloating. Just conclusion. Emily closed the laptop slowly, hands trembling. The air felt thick. Even the light through the curtains seemed heavier than it should be. She tried to cry, but the tears wouldn't come. There was no fight to be had. No audience. No one to appeal to. She had joked once that David was the kind of guy who made sure the receipts were laminated. Said it with a smirk at a dinner party, wine in hand, Michael beside her, chuckling. Now she understood. He hadn't raised his voice because he didn't need to. He didn't destroy her. He let her walk, eyes wide open, into the architecture he'd spent years quietly building. She thought she was clever. She thought he was soft. But David didn't play games. He wrote the rules, and then stepped back. So when she fell, hard, quietly, publicly, he wasn't there to catch her. Because he'd already moved on. Silently. Permanently. She sat in the silence, surrounded by echo and absence, and finally understood what real power looks like. Not loud. Not angry. Just irreversible.